Welcome to an Inside Carolina special live reaction show. I'm Tommy Ashley. We're sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt and Congruity. Speaking of Johnny T-Shirt, they have hooded sweatshirts. Buck Sanders, Taylor Vippolis, Jason Staples will be in here in just a second. Buck, I'm going to come to you first and utter words I never, in the history of doing this show, I thought I'd utter. Bill Belichick to be the head coach of North Carolina. But opening thoughts.
We're living in a multiverse that we're not familiar with, I think. But before we do anything else, before we go anyplace else, Inside Carolina, I think, is built to cover these moments and where we have coaching changes, and we've always covered coaching changes very well. I think we've always been at the top of our game during these moments, and we can come together and uh, put all of our heads together and figure out what's going on with North Carolina football and basketball. Um, but on top of all of that, I want to send a special shout out to Ben Sherman, who has been phenomenal through this episode of North Carolina football history. He never went anywhere except where the facts led him, and he didn't let anybody pressure him, including me, who was jabbing him every chance I got. Let's go, let's go, let's go. But Ben kept his cool and made sure that all the T's were crossed and I's were dotted before we went live with this sort of news. But beyond that, I think it's an interesting, very interesting hire, to say the least. I mean, it's got the whole world fascinated. Um, but I think the first place we ought to go and talk about this is a very experimental situation. It could turn out to be phenomenally good, phenomenally bad. It could go either way. But at least it is requiring like an all hands on deck attitude at the University of North Carolina, and is showing some commitment that we have not seen on the football side for a while. So uh, shout out to Ben, shout out to Inside Carolina, shout out to Bill Belichick, and let's go.
5 days of crossing T's and dotting I's.
That's right.
All the
But we
lawyers.
got there. We got across that finish line.
Yes.
I said it earlier in our group chat. I felt like I was on a basketball team playing the second game of a doubleheader, and the first one kept going to overtime, and we kept walking out to the edge, and then we'd walk back to the locker room and get ready. Shout out to Ben, like you said, the whole Inside Carolina crowd. Shout out to Mac on the Tar Pit message boards. Just been all over this stuff. And shout out to everybody in the chat. 862 now. People ask what's the biggest show we've ever done live? About 1,500. So we got a ways to go. And just for planning purposes, we're going to circle back. We're going to do a shorter show here. We're going to circle back at 9 o'clock after everybody's had a full time to marinate. Bring in Jeff Schottmer and Greg Barnes as well on a roundtable at 9. So we're not done. We've waited a long time for this. We're gonna get as many shows as we can rolling. Taylor, I'm gonna bring you in here. You've been, on the edge of this as well. You're kind of like all of us. You keep hearing it's a yes, it's a yes, it's a hold on, it's a wait. But Taylor, what you thinking?
Yeah, I think going back to the start, when you heard the name Bill Belichick, it was kind of like, whatever. This is a long shot. This is somebody just coming in to take a job, and I think that's kind of the approach that the administration kind of had. That Bill Belichick was just going to come in here. It was going to be a run of the mill interview, move on, get to the next candidate, and then surprisingly, they said he could turn the charm on. He was a lot more connected to the college game than you would think. Being around Jed Fish and his son at Washington certainly helped there. And then you started to hear more and more about that the Carolina job wasn't just a normal job to him. There was a lot of connections. A lot of his motivation coming back was about honoring his father's legacy, who was a UNC assistant from 53 to 55. And I put on Twitter today, one of the things I heard from the initial interview was when he's talking about what Chapel Hill means to him. One of the first things he said to Bubba Cunningham and the people conducting that interview was, "My first words growing up in Chapel Hill were Duke sucks." And I think from that meeting on, the mindset kind of shift in the athletic department to where it was a very real possibility. And Inside Carolina's kind of been on it from the start. And we said when you're moving on from Mac Brown, one of the goals from the administration was that the goal was to get younger. And last time I checked, 233 days younger. They put a check next to that goal. But yeah, it's exciting just because this is the Carolina job. This is a job that we were going to talk about whoever took it, no matter what. But now you're turning on ESPN, you're turning on the Pat McAfee show, you're turning on any sports channel right now, any national channel right now is talking about who Carolina hired, and that first game against TCU can't get here soon enough.
You're right. I saw a tweet earlier, and it was funny at the time. And it said, only at Carolina can you hire a 72-year-old and it be a youth movement. So it is fascinating. It is fascinating how we've all kind of come around. Now, I'm going to bring in Jason Staples because he can be the pessimist of the bunch. And I want to bring you in, Jason. One thing is clear, that whatever happens, the notion that Carolina's not all in on football has got to be out the window at this point. Jason, your opening thoughts. And you're muted. He has still no muted. Idea he's muted. You're still muted, brother.
I think Tommy's standing on the mute button over there to cut Jason
I don't
off.
have a mute button. I'm just thinking.
There it is.
It's not muted on my end. I don't
understand. There you go. There you go.
It wouldn't be a show.
Got a delay switch in there somewhere.
My goodness. So, you actually said exactly what my opening thought was going to be, which was that we don't know. There's no way of knowing whether this is actually going to have the results that everybody in Chapel Hill and, UNC people everywhere hope for. But the one thing we do know is that this is really the first time that North Carolina has been absolutely all in on the football side, and that there is clear evidence of that. You don't get Bill Belichick to come to Chapel Hill, to come to town and take that job if he doesn't believe he can win. And, he's a guy that is very systems oriented. He's very much aware of the need for major support and for the organization to be aligned to get all this stuff together to be able to win. And for him to take the job, that means he believes he can get that done. And that means he believes he's gotten the guarantees and the contractually guaranteed things in place to be able to build that kind of organization. So if nothing else, this is a sign that North Carolina has stepped into the 21st century, ironically by hiring a 20th century coach, but has stepped into the 21st century as a football program in terms of the resource allocation and in terms of commitment to football and commitment to doing what they're doing. So, and obviously there's been lots of reporting about Belichick sharing, his organizational Bible, which has been in development for a very, very long time, and customized it to UNC's situation, and saying this is what I want to. This is the playbook. This is what I want to run. And North Carolina signing off on that again is an indicator that they are absolutely all in there. We'll say more about this later, and I'll have more to say there. But I think that's a good place to start.
Yeah, I want to read a text that I got from somebody. I'm not going to say who it was, but it's safe to say that it's a name that resonates in the Carolina football family. It says, and if he hears this and he's mad at me for reading it, I didn't use your name, but it's too good not to share. It says, as someone who has bloodlines that run some 70 years with UNC football, this is a day I never thought would happen. Whether you love Belichick or hate him, I have dreamt the day when I could say we are all in. That day is here, and I'm stunned and beyond excited. Buck, I can't believe it, man. I'm 53, and I've been following Carolina football since 73. You've been doing it for a little bit longer than that. Like I said, to pose to Jason, like Jason talked about, this is the first time that this university has shown a commitment. However they got there, we can talk about that for days, however that commitment got there. But I must say, I'm impressed. I'm impressed that it's finally here, Buck. I really don't know how else to express it. And I'm just wanting to see how it all shakes out, because it's going to be a hell of a ride.
Yeah, it is. And before we get much further, I want everybody to know that Taylor and I both have on hoodies that are have been trimmed appropriately. So, but from that point forward, I want to talk about my initial reaction to the idea that Belichick was interviewing for the UNC job. I thought it was a bad idea. It just made no sense to me. Had never, I'm not muted, am I?
No, but I'm saying me too. I thought it was ridiculous.
I thought it was a very bad idea because, I mean, he never coached at a college level at all. He's never recruited. He's never had to deal with a faculty. He had never done any of the things that you would expect a college coach to bring to the table applying for a job at a Power 4 school. And so, at first I was just initially all the way against it. I just thought it was a bad idea. And then I started thinking about, okay, let's take Bill Belichick out of the equation. We're not talking about Bill right now. We're talking about any NFL coach that's applying for the job at UNC. And what would make that work? How does that make any sense? And as further I got in the process, I began to piece together what other people were starting to say about it. I think the Tar Pit message board helped to inform me a whole lot about what Belichick might bring to the table. And the fact that the pro game has moved toward the college game in some ways, in practice time availability for players and so on and so forth. And then the idea that the college game has moved way much towards the pro game in terms of compensating players. And so those things got to, I started following along with that logic, and it got clear to me that, yes, there was a possibility that this could work if everybody understood that, this is an experimental situation. We can't predict how this is going to come out. I don't think at the time that North Carolina hired Butch Davis that people thought that regime would end the way that it did. There was just no predicting that. And the thing about that, though, the connection with Butch, is that people forget and they write it off a little bit in their heads because he never had a record better than 8 wins. But Butch Davis had us that close. We were that close to being nationally relevant in football. And all the things that Butch brought to the table, Belichick is going to bring on steroids in so many different ways. And we could talk about this more tonight when we get into the details of it. But just one thing pulling out of what Belichick brings to the table is most people in the NFL believed that Bill Belichick was better at preparing his team to play your team than anybody else in the NFL. He was so good at game day preparation. He analyzed the game, figured out what your weaknesses was, figured out what he could do to maximize his chances of winning each and every game. It's a completely different mindset for Bill Belichick than it is for any coach I've ever known, which typically they say, you know what, we're going to play our game. We're going to do what we do, and this is about us. It's not about the other team. That's not Bill Belichick. From the moment you're on that schedule, he starts thinking about how can I beat the team on the schedule. How does that happen? And his game preparation is unbelievable in that regard. So there's so many things about this to like. It's not a sure thing. Let's not call it a sure thing, but it's a big thing. It's a huge thing for UNC football.
Yeah, I'd wager North Carolina football hadn't been in the national media
I
as
almost
much as
had
they
to
are
pull
this
this out on myself, so
save it
getting
for
a little
tonight.
worked up.
Save it for tonight. 9 o'clock roundtable with Inside Carolina Crew. Shout out to Johnny T-Shirt and JohnnyT-Shirt.com. Go get your hoodies. You can cut the sleeves off if you want. If Buck wants to give me a few of those Inside Carolina no off-season ones, I'll cut the sleeves off of one of them. Vip's got his ready to roll. Jason's got the shirt. But, yeah, Johnny T-Shirt and Congruity, Matt at congruityhr.com for your small, mid-sized business. Vip. And something else, if folks are watching this and there's 1,365 in the chat, so we need to push past 1,500, and then I'm gonna let everybody
hit that
go
like
to dinner.
button too.
Yeah, and I want 1,000 likes on this. Set that
Subscribe.
record as well.
Subscribe
To all this stuff. But one thing you need to do is subscribe to the Inside Carolina premium boards. I would wager 90% of you in the chat now are on it. But if you're not, there's a thread called Extra Scoop from the Belichick hire, where Ben Sherman, once again, dropping nuggets of how this all went down. Vip, we're not going to keep everybody. It's the dinner hour, so we're going to let everybody go eat, and then we're going to come back at 9. But when you think about how this all went down, you've been around the program a lot and still know plenty of people around it. What is the general feeling that you've sensed from folks since the afternoon that North Carolina or that Inside Carolina reported that Bill Belichick was not only interviewed, but they liked what they heard?
Yeah, once it started to get real, it kind of turned into similar to what Buck was saying, where it's like this is either going to be a grand slam of a hire or a colossal failure that's on the national stage. And when you are a school like North Carolina, like you're not this traditional Alabama, the LSUs, these powerhouse schools that could go and take any coach from any level and try to plug him and play him in your system. When you're North Carolina and you have the chance to have the Grand Slam hire, yeah, there's a chance it doesn't work. But there's also a chance it doesn't work if you go the G5 route. There's a chance it doesn't go if you go the fired route, where if you're talking about a coach like Bill Belichick, who's considered one of the best football minds, and he's seriously interested in your program and you're not just wasting your time on an interview, then yeah, it makes sense and it gets a lot of excitement. Like thinking to that TCU North Carolina game, everybody on Inside Carolina was already going to watch that game no matter what, because they're the most diehard fans of the Carolina football fan base. But now you're bleeding over into national coverage the same way where if you got sick of how much people were talking about Dion at Colorado, you haven't seen anything yet with North Carolina and Bill Belichick, what's about to come. And I think one of the things that's kind of being overblown with Belichick's age and the people that are kind of comparing it to the Mac Brown situation, the one thing I would kind of push back, whenever you see Bill Belichick, whenever he's on the Manning cast, whenever he's doing these NFL film breakdowns, in 6 years with Mac Brown, I don't remember how many X's and O's conversations he ever had at his press conferences. And that's not to say he's not a great X's and O's coach, but Mac Brown is a lot more of a salesman than he is of a X's and O's coach that can win you on Saturdays. if we're sitting here next year and we're talking about North Carolina getting out coached, I would be shocked, because that goes against kind of everything that you know about Bill Belichick, and a lot of it is going to be contingent upon the staff that he puts in place. But this is for sure an exciting time when it went from why are we wasting our time to, oh my God, this is beyond real.
I said it's either the greatest PR stunt in history or a look at an unserious program, and I have got no problem with saying that I was wrong there. One thing you hit on about the age and all that, Vip, and I think this is important, and Jason, I'll let you comment on this. Recruiting's not about going and charming somebody anymore. And Buck, you talked about the nanner pudding and all that kind of stuff on recruiting visits. It's not about that, Jason. It's about NIL. We've seen how it can work.
1545, Tommy.
I know,
1545.
1545 is the record, I think. We'll have to check it. But Jason, that side of it, the recruiting side of it, the NIL side of it, but something in the chat that Brandon said, and shout out to Brandon because I was going there, the accountability side of it. How many times will we say you get what you allow next fall, do you think, Jason?
Oh, I will use that until I'm in the ground. I can promise you that. It'll come up. But the fact is that just makes me a lot like Belichick in that respect. And for what it's worth, I'm one of the few people probably in the media who has read Belichick's father's book, Advanced Scouting Methods, which is still the original scouting Bible for people who are getting into scouting players and scouting teams and things like that. Which that's old stuff. But at any rate, I think Vip's right that when you're talking about the age difference, or the comparable ages with Mac and Belichick's a different kind of coach, and I think that does matter. The other thing is that as big of a name brand as Mac Brown is in the state of North Carolina in terms of recruiting, Tommy, I will disagree that it is a little bit about charm and all of that. That matters to some degree. The charisma of a Deion Sanders matters, even if he never goes into people's. I mean, the guy's only been in like 4 or 5 living rooms to recruit that I know of, right? He doesn't hit the road and do the in-home visits like a lot of coaches, but his charisma matters. With Belichick, the brand name is going to matter a whole lot, and I was thinking about this when it first came up, and I was talking to a good friend of mine, a former teammate who played in the NFL for a lot of years, and he called me saying, "Is North Carolina really going to do this? Like, there's no way Belichick is going to want to deal with like families and college kids and all this compared to NFL stuff. Like, there's no way." And then I thought about it, and I was like, well, he started dating his current girlfriend when she was in college. So, I mean,
had to go there, didn't you, Jason? You had to go there.
I had to go there, but the truth of the matter is, this tells me something about whether or not he is capable of and willing to relate to and deal with college students. It's a relevant point. It is a relevant point. So, here's the thing, is when you get the opportunity to, when Bill Belichick calls you and says, "Hey, I'm honestly not sure if you're good enough to play at North Carolina, but we have a spot for you if you want it." There's going to be a lot of players in the transfer portal, a lot of players in high school who are going to get that call from Bill Belichick. And if there's a name in coaching that's bigger than Nick Saban, maybe it's this guy, right? And Saban is a guy who is not going to give you a lot of warm fuzzies on the recruiting trail, but he didn't have any problem recruiting. People took discounts to go to Alabama because they wanted to play for Nick Saban. And the other part of this is when it comes to hiring coaches, here's a question. If you're a sitting offensive coordinator somewhere or a defensive coordinator and your phone rings and you're at, say, I don't know, an SEC, a good SEC program. And Bill Belichick calls you on the phone and says, and actually, I think his son is going to be the defensive coordinator, so that's out on that. But an offensive coordinator, let's say, or position coach, and Bill Belichick calls and says, "Hey, we'd like you to come and coach for us." That's going to carry weight, y'all. That does carry weight. And so, the thing is, if he surrounds himself with the kind of people who are likely to want to coach for him, and he makes good choices, and odds are he knows a lot about who he's going to want to have on that staff, you could be seeing a pretty significant talent influx in terms of coaching staff and in terms of personnel. And, my old coach used to say, the secret to being a great coach is having better players than the guy across from you. And you bring in the kind of staff that Belichick may well be able to hire, because again, that brand is going to carry weight. People are going to want to coach with him just because on their resume in 5 years, when Bill Belichick retires, presumably, let's just say 5 years or 3 years, I don't care. That guy has on his resume, I coached under Bill Belichick. He's going to get hired somewhere. He's going to move up in the profession just based on that. And then those guys are going to be able to go out and get more talent. So this is where North Carolina finds itself in terms of brand. And they should be able, with that brand name, and North Carolina's already got a strong, recognizable brand, nice, uniforms and all that matter to kids. All that stuff is good, but you add Belichick's brand to that, and they will be able to compete with the top programs in the sport, I think, for a lot of the talent that you need to have. And Colorado is a good example of this in terms of what they've done in the transfer portal, what they've done. I mean, obviously Belichick doesn't have a Shadur Sanders as a son, but they've been able to fill the cupboard and get things, get enough talent there to win 9 wins this year. I got to think it's going to be interesting. I don't know that it's a guarantee. I don't think it's a guarantee, but it could work.
We'll talk more about that this evening after 9, but I want to bring in somebody pretty important to Inside Carolina.
Oh, I'm disappointed he's not wearing a sleeveless hoodie from Johnny T-shirt. Do they have those yet?
Johnny T-shirt, if you're listening, sleeveless hoodies for Greg Barnes and everybody.
I want one too.
but Greg, let me get you in here. Obviously, you've done a ton of work behind the scenes as well, and covering all things Carolina football. But just real quickly, and we can talk more about it later. But your thoughts here on how this all went down, that it went down, and what it means.
Well, what it means, it has nothing to do with Bill Belichick. I think that's the number one takeaway. National media, local media. Everybody's going to focus on the Belichick part, which I get. Hall of Famer, 8 Super Bowl rings. This is about so much more than Bill Belichick. And the reason I say that, yes, he's got a 3-year deal worth $30 million. North Carolina, from what we've been told, has agreed to increase assistant coach salaries. There's going to be a full general manager staff to help with talent evaluation and recruiting. I think probably most importantly to what fans like to hear about the recruiting aspects of things, NIL has gone through the roof. So not only is North Carolina, they've already committed to being full rev share. Bubba said that for weeks now. But beyond that, there's going to be additional NIL funding through the commercial entities. So when North Carolina and Bill Belichick go out to recruit, there's going to be this massive pot of money that North Carolina has not had before. We have heard Hubert Davis, we've heard Mac Brown talk about the lack of those funds. What we have right now is a full commitment to football that we have never seen before at the University of North Carolina. So as I said, it is not about Bill Belichick. This is about North Carolina making an unprecedented commitment that will carry forward well past Bill Belichick's retirement date, whenever that is, a few years in the future.
100% right. 100% right. That's it. That's what this ultimately is about.
Greg, when you look at it, and you've been doing this, like I said, forever, anything did that part surprise you, or if it didn't surprise you, just the realization by North Carolina is that you cannot afford not to be all in. You got to spend money to make money. They always say that, but this had to get done for Carolina to get to the next level in college athletics.
See, what a segue there, Tommy. Yeah, we've talked about it on Next Level how many times over the past year and a half. And, people were saying the right things, whether it be the chancellor, whether it be Bubba, John Pryor, chair of the board of trustees, he talked with me about it. There was this conversation of, hey, we see what the SEC and the Big Ten are doing. Yes, we would like to get there eventually, but grant of rights is a big hurdle. But beyond that, if we get there, are we going to be ready? Because if you just go as is and you get to the SEC, you're going to be bottom of the barrel unless things change. So a lot of people were saying the right things of, hey, this is what we need to do. We need to have a commitment to football unlike anything we have seen before. And Guskowitz said that, Pryor said that. So that's an important aspect. Now, when you get to the actual moment that this comes and you're like, okay, wait a minute, Belichick's actually interested. Like, this is for real. He took this seriously, had an incredible presentation. All we have to do is commit, and we have to take that leap and just say, you know what, we're going to be all about football here. And so I think there was numerous opportunities in this negotiation process where Carolina felt like, okay, we're in good shape here with what we're talking about in this negotiation list. And then they would provide it, and Belichick and his agent would look at it and say, okay, it's not bad. How about this? And so there was numerous possibilities for North Carolina to say, you know what? It's a bridge too far. It's too much. And I think that's one of the things, when you've seen some things pop up on the board or even on social media saying the deal's almost done, like they feel good about it. It's in Belichick's court or it's in Carolina's court. That's just part of the negotiation process. And the fact that North Carolina kept trying to make these changes and these improvements to meet Belichick's demands, I think shows that resolve. And it shows that they are committed to fielding a legitimate football program. And there's a lot that goes into that. And it's one of those things we're going to have to wait and see how it plays out. But you got to have the passion. You got to have the willingness to do it first and foremost. And this deal speaks to that. We finally have something to kind of put our hands around and say, all right, look, we've talked about this program being a sleeping giant for how long? Now they're doing what they have to do to wake that giant up.
No better way to wrap our live reactions than with Greg Barnes dropping the heat. North Carolina jumps all in the pool. Bill Belichick, head coach. Stay tuned to Inside Carolina. Stay tuned to Greg Barnes. I put myself in the center, Greg, so you don't just sit in there. Stay tuned to Greg Barnes and Ben Sherman and Buck and Taylor and Jason, and we'll all be back tonight at 9 o'clock. So get you some supper, get you some dinner, get you some coffee, and a refreshment of your choice. Come join us tonight at 9 o'clock on the Inside Carolina Roundtable as we talk about the Bill Belichick effect at North Carolina. More on what Greg's talked about. Shout out to the 1,783 people currently in the chat.
I was going to say just a little off on that number.
Yeah,
we're going to go over 2,000 tonight.
Yeah,
we're going to go over 2,000 tonight.
Yeah, I was never good at math. I do know 3 years, $30 million is a lot of money, though. Bill Belichick.
You need to talk about Johnny T-shirt before we leave and congruity, Tommy.
Well, we already talked about Johnny T-shirt.
Did I miss that?
You did. Johnny T-shirt has hoodies. Johnny T-shirt has everything you possibly could use for Carolina. Now you know where to go to get all these.
Just making sure the people that take care of us are getting taken care of.
Yeah. Email matt@congruityhr.com for your small to mid-sized business assessment. Carolina's shown what they can do when they have some good guidance from business people. What can matt@congruityhr.com do for you for your small to mid-sized business? Check them out. It's a free assessment. Tell them Inside Carolina sent you. Subscribe to Inside Carolina Premium Message Board. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. And if I'm allowed, we're out. Thanks for everybody for joining. Everybody have a nice evening. We'll see you at 9 o'clock.
You're going to need that timer tonight, Buck.
Almost did earlier. Appreciate it, guys.
Yeah.